You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
Groovy. No more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Praise God, big boy.
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joined today will be Derek.
Hey, brother.
And Sean.
You guys got a light?
And we'll be discussing The Lost Boys, or if my voice is cracked there, The Lost Boys.
You're going through puberty like Corey Haim.
Yeah, the 1987 vampire film directed by Joel Schumacher years before he would take over and ruin the Batman franchise by putting nipples and everything and cod pieces and having lines like Arnold Schwarzenegger saying "chill out" as Mr. Freeze. But before we get into discussing The Lost Boys, we'll go through recent news and things we've been watching. And in recent news, there's a few different things out here. So there will be a new Saw film that's been called Jigsaw. And I really hope it's just the puppet. I think we shared before the video. I know, Sean, you had shared it. The Living with Jigsaw, where it's like the Jigsaw puppet just being like a dick to his roommates and like putting like traps everywhere. I hope it's like if it was just that I would watch.
That's the direction to go when you run a franchise into the ground. Just totally turn it on its head and kind of be self-aware and go crazy with it.
Yeah, because the last movie in the franchise came out in like 2010, so it's been it'll have been 7 years because it's coming out on October 27th, 2017. But if it follows up and links into the prior films, I don't know how many people remember those.
Yeah,
because the Friday the 13th films, usually those can do a 4-minute recap at the beginning of each movie to bring you to speed with everything you need to know.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, but with these movies, it got really convoluted with Donnie Wahlberg and all this stuff going on, and I don't remember. I think I watched part 4 maybe because it used to be on HBO. Then I just kind of stopped watching it because I really wasn't into all that stuff.
You know, what would be better is if it was just the Muppets and with Jim Henson Creations, just cutting a wrestling style promo describing the past events of the movies, getting everybody up to snuff.
Yeah, that would
now
having just a Muppet reenactment of everything. I would be okay with that. And it's being written by Josh Stolberg and Pete Goldfinger, who wrote Piranha 3D, 3DD, and Sorority Row. Piranha 3D wasn't terrible. I haven't seen the sequel. I haven't seen Sorority Row, but maybe they'll make it a more comedic movie this time. Who knows?
21 Jump Street, that stuff, That's what they did with Piranha 3D. It was very self-referential. It knew what it was. It was kind of, the fun of it was that it was supposed to be schlocky. Yeah, I like Piranha 3D for what it was.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. I mean, none of us are all that excited. Maybe they'll put out a trailer that's awesome and it's something that's worth seeing. But as of right now, it's just we know it's happening. And then I know before Derek had mentioned something about maybe we just set the new Saw movie in a hostel and then it just crosses over with Eli Roth and everybody just tortures everybody. And it's just you have two guys sitting across from each other in chairs and they're tied down with knives and stabbing each other in the legs, getting closer and closer to their penises. And then that's the last shot of the movie is them both at the very same time, both stabbing into each other's crotches.
Or just them torturing just themselves, trying to out-torture the other one.
I feel like that
would be pretty good.
I mean... There was a segment in, I think it was ABC's of Death about people having to do things they had to masturbate and finish first, and then the person that didn't got brutally murdered, and then once you won enough, then you got to be the person that was on a table having sex with someone that the people then would have to stimulate themselves to. So
oh my God,
that expanded out into an entire movie would probably be nearly unwatchable for the majority of people, but
but if Rob Zombie directed it with Muppets, it would be extremely watchable. Yeah, Kermie, and then you would just have complete ridiculousness. 24-inch pythons everywhere. It would be a good movie.
And then to tie into Eli Roth talk, he's going to be directing, in addition to directing Bruce Willis in a Death Wish remake, he's also making a young adult gothic horror novel adaptation movie that is The House with the Clock in Its Walls, and it's going to star Jack Black. So he's coming off of Goosebumps and this upcoming Goosebumps sequel. And the description for the plot of the book is essentially that a young orphan boy goes to live with his uncle. The uncle, it turns out, is a mediocre witch, and the boy finds himself in a world of magic and danger when he discovers the existence of a clock inside the walls of the house that is designed to bring about doomsday. So, and this will be the first non-rated R movie that Eli Roth has made. So how all this works will be yet to be seen. I mean, and it's interesting because like Eli Roth made that movie Knock Knock with Keanu Reeves, who was probably the biggest star he worked with at that point. Then he also, after that, made The Green Inferno, or I think he made The Green Inferno first, and then it didn't come out until after Knock Knock. So he's kind of getting to work with bigger talent despite his movies not doing great at the box office. I mean, I guess they had to have made some movie on video or something. Mm-hmm. Or it's just the old thing where male directors just get to fail upwards throughout their career, as opposed to if a female director makes one movie that doesn't perform up to snuff, they go into director's jail for 10 years or something. But
is that what happened to? Is that what happened to Patty Jenkins, or am I thinking of somebody else?
Happened to somebody else. She directed Monster, the movie with Charlize Theron and Christina Ricci, and then she went into TV for a while. But there have been other female directors who would have one movie that did well and then one that didn't, and the one that didn't got them knocked out of contention for big movies for a while, as opposed to somebody like Zack Snyder. After 300, you could argue that most of his movies have failed to make the amount of money they wanted, and he keeps getting jobs. So
and they get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, like Watchmen, was not a very profitable film for Warner Brothers. Like Man of Steel, Man of Steel and Batman v Superman have eventually made money when all is said and done, but they didn't make as much as they had hoped. Because a Batman vs Superman movie should be able to make $1 billion worldwide, and it didn't. And it really needed to do that to be as successful as they hoped. Granted, those movies generate billions in merchandise sales and things like that, but did not live up to what they wanted. But yeah, so Eli Roth has a few movies coming out that we'll have to, I don't know about be on the lookout for, but they're coming out.
Yeah. Well, we have to be aware of them.
Yeah. So then other news briefly, the X-Files for the upcoming 11th season, the writers have been announced, and you'll see Chris Carter coming back, of course, as he was the showrunner. And then they'll have Darren Morgan, Glenn Morgan, and James Wong, who all worked on the prior season. And then there's also some new writers. And then the kind of social aspect of the story is all this has been announced. There's not any female writers on the show, or at least the lead writers are it's all male writers. So interesting that is something that, I mean, it does make sense that you have like Chris Carter and these other writers who worked on the show during the earlier seasons or earlier runs of the show and during some of the more important parts of this series, but to just not have any female voice, it seems a little bit interesting. Especially considering the fact that I thought the Chris Carter episodes of season 10 were the worst, but so hopefully season
they were the cheesiest for sure. Like they just kind of felt
because
I don't know.
Because Glenn Morgan and James Wong have directed other things that have been, some level of success. Like Glenn Morgan did the Black Christmas remake, and then James Wong had directed let's see, because I know they're involved with the Final Destination series, because originally that was like a spec script for the X-Files. They got turned into a movie. Then some other news, David Fincher is going to direct the World War Z sequel, after all, something that was up in the air for a while. And so it's going to see Brad Pitt and David Fincher work together again. Of course, they previously were in Fight Club, or David Fincher directed and Brad Pitt starred in Fight Club.
And Benjamin Button, right?
Yeah, that old movie that nobody likes to think about.
It's probably the one Fincher film since, I don't know, that might be the one Fincher film I haven't seen, I think.
Yeah, so World War Z, like regardless of what everybody thought of it, like it wasn't a terrible movie. Like it was enjoyable enough. I think most people are just upset that they called it World War Z because that was like it was a great name and a book a lot of people liked. Mm-hmm. And then the final product really didn't resemble that book in any way, shape, or form. So I think that was what turned a lot of people off. So, but David Fincher being involved at least, ensures it can be far more interesting than if they just got some like, studio hack like Brett Ratner or somebody to come in. So
yeah, I'm interested to see what he does because it's Fincher, So him back at it with horror films.
Yeah, and we just talked on the last one of the recent podcasts about Zodiac, so his work, and then we also did Alien 3, so we talked about his work some recently. There's not a ton known about the story of it, so we'll have to keep an eye out for that. But him being attached does make that something I'm now interested in or excited for, versus previously just like, I'll see it on Netflix or on video.
Yep, I'll be going to theater to see that one now.
Even though none of us watched the show, The Exorcist season 2 is going to be back on Fox, which is a show that a lot of people liked. I just didn't really ever get a chance to watch it. So if you're a fan of that show, it's coming back. Scream Queens is not. And I thought that third season was terrible, or second season. I thought it was terrible. So not exactly missing the fact that we don't have a new one.
So Exorcist season 2 and Stranger Things season 2 both hitting in October.
Yep, and then also Blumhouse is working with Sci-Fi to reboot a TV series version of Tremors, which will be an 8-episode run. They'll have Kevin Bacon producing and starring in. So that will be interesting because that brings the level of star power in the Tremors franchise up to the highest level it's had since the first film. Mm-hmm. And we did Tremors, didn't we? Yeah.
Probably. Derek, your audio's kind of low. I don't know if it's you're far from the mic or what, but we did Tremors. I liked Tremors too when I was younger.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that a lot of people saw 50 times on USA. Network. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that they didn't just, they evolved and they kind of made some new situations. They didn't just use the same creatures and have some new characters, and I don't know, it felt fresh enough to justify its existence. Even though it's not as good as the first one, at least it wasn't kind of lazy about its ideas. Totally lazy.
Yeah, and we haven't really seen too much TV stuff produced by Blumhouse, so we'll have to see how that turns out. But the fact that they're working with it, I think it'll be better than a standard sci-fi show could be. They've had stuff people really like, and I've watched some of the shows on their network over the years, but hopefully it's a little bit better than some of the kind of kitschy, campy stuff. With Kevin Bacon involved, he was on that serial killer show that was on Fox, was like The Following or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which it was good for like the first 2 seasons, and then after that it got kind of...
Yeah, so... hopefully it'll be top-notch TV, or at least good genre television. And it being an 8-episode series, I think is a lot more room for them to explore like a good story without pushing their storytelling and stretching it out and doing all the stuff that kills a lot of those sci-fi shows to me, where they just have too many episodes where nothing happens.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to go into a diatribe about Battlestar Galactica, but that show should not have had 22-episode seasons, or seasons longer than 10 episodes. I think, and
not again with the Battlestar Galactica, William. Actually, I've never heard you complain about that show.
Yeah, I have friends who are big into it, and I watched it from beginning to end. Yeah, it's like, oh, so where the show ended was kind of ridiculous, and then they had far too many filler episodes. But yeah, so there's more on that. And in some other news, there is some progress on The Conjuring 3 moving forward, as that movie will be happening, unsurprisingly, since they continue to make so much money. And the lawsuit that's going on with the Conjuring series, like the $900 million lawsuit, that isn't completed yet. So I wonder how much that's going to change the trajectory of the franchise at this point. But of course, it's going to have Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga back. So we'll see more films in that franchise.
I'll be interested to see how bold they go with that, or if they're going to just totally come up with something far removed from I guess whatever is in the book that they're being sued over.
Yeah. Yeah, like, not a lot is known about what's going to be the case that's covered. I think it's still not, there's like a trailer or anything like that, but it's in progress. We will be seeing it. And then one other brief bit of news before we get into what we've been watching, just because I remember this and think it's really cool. Jake Busey is going to be playing the son of Gary Busey's character from Predator 2 and the new Shane Black, The Predator, that's coming out.
Yeah, that should be pretty awesome and fun, because Shane Black is very much, he's aware. He kind of always turns things on their head as far as genre films and everything. So hopefully he plays with the fact that maybe like what the public perceives Gary Busey as also.
Which has changed over the years.
I hope it's just him, Jake Busey, talking about a series of stories about crazy stuff his dad has done the entire movie.
Yeah, that would be entertaining. But being a Shane Black Predator, I think it should be really good on its own, and then having all these other connections should be entertaining. But we got Jake Busey back confirmed. I still they never confirmed if Arnold was going to be in it or not, did they?
I don't know.
Not going to be in it. From what I read, it sounded like, unless they're just holding everything back, but it sounded like the role that he was going to be in was a smaller one, so he kind of opted out of doing it.
Yeah, I guess makes sense for him, but he did those Expendable movies, or at least one of them, which I didn't think any of those are very good, but
yeah,
we will see. So yeah, so that's a cool bit of news, I think. But now we can move into discussing what we've been watching. And to start off, I didn't get a chance to watch, just to continue the trend, I didn't get a chance to watch all that much stuff this week. I did watch Twin Peaks, which we just recorded some videos on, so those will be out for you to go watch.
Yeah.
And all I gotta say is the most recent episode had a bunch of stuff I would have never expected, and at the same time, it totally makes sense that that's a David Lynch thing.
Yeah.
And if somebody just jumped in and watched that episode without watching the rest of the show, they would probably be very upset.
I mean, every episode has illustrated why it was important for David Lynch to direct this entire season, or the return.
Like a showrunner with like directors for hire on each episode would not have worked.
No, it's very, very much a collaboration between him and Mark Frost. And I mean, this previous episode, as people have said, Twin Peaks changed TV when it first aired, and people have been trying to replicate it. Like, people will be talking about probably this episode for another 20 or 30 years, and people will be trying to replicate kind of this form as well. Like, it very much, it feels like almost something like Eraserhead. Some of this is in black and white. Also, too, a lot of time without dialogue. It kind of also reminded me of like, Kubrick's 2001. There's comparisons to Terrence Malick, but it's, it is pure David Lynch. It isn't just him mimicking anybody else's style. It is Lynch kind of going for it whole hog. But it also has like a narrative backing, and it was, super incredible, super important as far as what this means for Twin Peaks and kind of that world. But yeah, show could not get better. I don't know if there'll be another show that I will enjoy or appreciate more in my entire lifetime than this season.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see where that's going. So I got a chance to watch that. Watched the season finales of Fargo season 3 and Better Call Saul, which both of them I really enjoyed. Fargo season 3 I didn't love as much as season 2. I still thought it was a good show, and it did some very Coen-esque things. Like I said, I wasn't as hot on it as season 2. I still thought it was a good show. Better Call Saul, on the other hand, I really did enjoy this season and what it gave, and how they spent some episodes with somebody just setting up something and then, like, for a payoff. Like, there weren't many other shows on TV doing stuff like that. So I like seeing these kind of auteur-driven shows, and shows where it's not superheroes or there's not like nonstop sex or violence, just like that. Like, having all these shows, these interesting elements is.
Tell me, William, what shows are you watching that's nonstop sex?
Well, like, even
What
though,
channel is that on?
So even though I like it, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a ton of shows out there that have nothing but like nonstop sexual content, which can work in some context. I think Game of Thrones has gotten a little bit better about it, but yeah, I like that there's shows like Better Call Saul where the stakes are very human. There's no special, supernatural or superhero type things to it. It's all just human stakes. So I've been enjoying those a lot. And I also did watch the zombie film, The Girl with All the Gifts, which had Glenn Close in it and Patty Constantine, who was in like Hot Fuzz. And it was kind of a different take on the zombie genre. It's pretty much just like in some like dystopian world where zombies exist. Mm-hmm. They found like some small children that had been born from somebody that was infected or something. So they, for the most part looked human, but they still have like zombie traits. And like if they get near a person, will try to like attack them, even though they can have conversations and learn in school and stuff. So they try to, use that to learn things. And then like, all hell breaks loose. And then there's the main girl, the one with all the gifts, who is, the kind of leader. So it, follows that plot line of they try to figure, like a cure or stuff like that, or take advantage of her ability to be like a smart thinking zombie. So it was interesting. Like it kind of had overtones that got a little bit too close to I Am Legend for me. But I
like the concept at least.
I remember it getting getting festival buzz or discussion.
Yeah.
But I didn't think it was great.
Not a home run.
I wouldn't want to devote an entire episode to reviewing that on here. But it was on Amazon, I believe. Amazon Prime maybe is where we watched it. But that wasn't too long. But aside from that, I didn't really watch anything else that was horror related. So,
Derek, what about you?
This week I really didn't get a chance to watch much of anything extra.
I watched actually several things. Nothing that was too. I got basically David Lynch and then non-horror stuff. Veep and Silicon Valley. Watch season finales of those. Enjoy those a lot. I definitely give the nod to Veep season finale over Silicon Valley. Both are good though. And then I watched that Ron Howard film Parenthood. Just happened to watch that, which was just phenomenal. But watched that like right before that news came out that he is taking over for Phil Miller and Chris Lord on the Han Solo film.
Yeah.
And then I watched Friday with Nicole. She had never seen that all the way through for some reason. So I had to introduce her to that. And then I did watch Inland Empire, David Lynch's film, which I hadn't seen before. And it, for as slow as I heard that film was, it actually surprised me at how much kind of happens early on. It kind of maybe hits a lull where you're kind of not for sure where it's going at a certain point. And that happens sometimes with a lot of Lynch films first time through also. But I actually like the concept a lot, and it kind of mirrors a lot of things he's explored with Mulholland Drive, and a lot of his work. But I enjoyed it. I kind of like seeing the lo-fi look of it. And the cool thing about it was, it was shot on a DV cam or a digital video camera that was standard definition. And he had some great actors, but, the production of it didn't seem too high budget. And it kind of showed you like, hey, you don't need to shoot on film. You don't need a red camera to make a good movie. He was able to do it with that. And once you kind of got into it, you were just used to looking at that, and the story again is what mattered. And then after that, I watched the documentary David Lynch, The Art of Life, I believe it's called. And it's very much, it's not like Brian De Palma's documentary where he's sitting there talking about his experiences working on films. and working with people. It's nothing like that. It's very much a kind of about where he came from and his life as an artist and how he became, he got into painting and that's all he wanted to do with his life. And it basically goes into his home life, where he grew up, who kind of fostered his I guess creativity and kind of pushed him and supported him in painting, and then kind of basically what led up to him doing Eraserhead, and then that's kind of where it ends. Not that it's a documentary. It's not like it's a huge spoiler, but just so people know, this isn't one to watch if you're just worried about his work in film. But if you're interested in him as an artist, obviously it's very awesome that we got this documentary. So I definitely recommend it if you're a David Lynch fan. But it's maybe not as much sizzle or as excitement, but you do get to see tons of his artwork, like, awesome artwork from him. So it's kind of great just to watch it for that also, to kind of just get a feel of a lot of the work in different mediums he's worked in. But yeah, and then The Lost Boys.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about the 1987 Joel Schumacher directed movie that starred Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland, Jamie Gertz, Diane West, Corey Feldman. Very 80s cast, with Corey Feldman in there and Corey Haim. And so this is another vampire movie from the 80s. And I always thought like this and Fright Night were like a good double bill, because they were just kind of like 80s, not cheese, just like 80s genre, like vampire movies that were more fun than scary.
Yeah.
And The Lost Boys had like the Frog Brothers, so it's kind of got like a little bit of comedic element to it. But one thing too I appreciate about this movie is that when I was like 12, I was obsessed with dirt bikes. And this movie has a lot of them.
Yes, a lot of good dirt bike action for sure.
Basically just the story, and we'll do full spoilers throughout.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't seen The Lost Boys, it's pretty prevalent. So the basic story is that after moving to a new town, two brothers discover that the area is a haven for vampires, and that's from IMDb. So yeah, the basic idea is that a family moves to a new town, and it's the murder capital of the world. And it's because they're vampires. And there's a lot of stuff where they go to the boardwalk or go to like this old hotel that like sank or something. And
yeah, they got like an awesome underground layer.
Yeah, so I guess Derek, you can start. Like, so what did you take away from the movie?
Because you said you never watched this in full before, right?
Seen all of it, but had never really watched it in full. It's just funny to me. Like, my first takeaway is just how funny Kiefer Sutherland looks in this, because like the Kiefer Sutherland I know is like from like the 24 and all that stuff he was in. So it's funny seeing him like super 80s dub.
Yeah,
with that earring,
and a long hair and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's a pretty good movie. It's just a really, like you said, it does pair pretty well with Fright Night.
Yeah, this
go on waves, especially with like vampire stuff, because that was really popular. Seemed like in the 80s, and then it kind of tried to be popular in like the 90s, but it kind of died out, and then it got its big resurgence again when you had the Twilight movies come out.
For me, the film I always kind of compare this to, or at least when I think of a good pairing, is Near Dark, just because it was another. It's a different tone. Like, this is a similar tone to Fright Night for sure, but just because it is a group of kind of modern day, almost like a modern day vampire gang, and of course that one is more stark and kind of, I don't want to say depressing, but it's not as light as this film, which I both love, both of them. I think I did a video on Near Dark. I don't know if it was like a trailer talk or what, but yeah, this is like one of my favorite vampire films, and it always felt like, I think I saw something that was like the 30th anniversary or something this week, and that's why I suggested us doing it. But for me, like it feels so much like a summer, kind of a big summer blockbuster horror film, you know, that you would envision happening in the 80s, and that's exactly what it is. Like it is, so many segments in this feel like they're just like mini music videos as well, and I like love the music in it. The personality of the film is so strong and also so good, and it's so funny. And yeah, like I like that it kind of, it's maybe, you know, it's kind of like a pop horror thing where it's not too stark and it's not too depressing and it's not too scary, but at the same time it's very original too. A lot of films, of course, now a lot of like low budget horror films go after the Carpenter, using the John Carpenter music and stuff, and that's what you kind of think of when you think of the 80s. But I loved how this film just had like a killer soundtrack, and for me, like it's almost like what you do when you have a bigger budget to make kind of this type of horror film. Like that's the good direction to go in. You know, the stuff made by Carpenter, that was by design on a lower budget, and it's awesome and atmospheric, and I love it as well. But I love that this kind of has its own personality through its style, the way it's shot, the colors, the cast, the characters, the music, like everything about it is so specifically fun and kind of, I don't know, it almost feels like an evolution of classic horror films as well.
And two, like I think that had a good approach to a lot of the vampire lore, in that you had holy water and you had garlic and you had other things like that came into play. But then you also had like the twist on it about like if you invite a vampire into the home, like it negates the powers that you have or the effectiveness of things.
Yeah, that's a great little twist in the film that kind of keeps you guessing.
And two, because you also had stuff that came out like in that same general era, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like the actual movie version, not the show.
That was like early 90s, but yeah, it was not too far away.
Yeah, so the vampire was still like kind of a thriving like B genre for people to play around in, and it wasn't overdone like it is now. With well, I mean, I guess too, like you have like the Twilight stuff that kind of took it in a little bit different direction, like the Vampire Diaries, like the TV show. But like in the 90s, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had like Blade, which is kind of like the comic book version of it, and then but this movie, like you had the very 80s wardrobe, and like Marco in the movie, he had a very distinctive look as a vampire. Him and Evil Ed from Fright Night should have teamed up in like a spin-off movie between them, because that would have been pretty amazing. But yeah,
and Marco is Alex Winter from Bill and Ted, not Keanu Reeves.
Yes, the other guy. Because when you watch the movie, you're like, where do I know him from? And then you're like, oh, that's where. But yeah, so like the overall movie, like just going in order. So you have like where it starts out, Michael kind of gets challenged to like ride dirt bikes through what looks like they just have them sitting in place with fog being sprayed in people's faces.
Yeah.
As they approach the edge of the beach, and he almost like drives to his death. And the Kiefer Sutherland character David wants him to become a vampire, and then he drinks like the stuff that's blood, and they're all hanging off of the train tracks.
I love that. I also always love that moment too when he's given him rice, and then it's maggots, and then he's got his noodles, and it's worms. And Derek, I don't know if you remember that, but like they specifically, granted it's in other films, but I think they're specifically calling to this scene in What We Do in the Shadows. Remember when they're in the diner, and he's got like chips, and he's like, "Oh, now it's maggots." He's like, "No, it's got to look something like."
So like that moment is very memorable.
Yeah.
And then too, like the other memorables, like when Michael starts to like levitate or like fly above his bed, he's outside the house trying to get back in.
Yeah.
And his brother Sam's afraid he's gonna try to kill him because like the dog attacks him and stuff like that. So. You have those elements. This
movie moves too. It's so like it doesn't sit around. I feel like it's constantly something new's happening. It's been maybe a little while since I watched it, but I've probably watched this film, I don't know, at least 15 times, probably closer to 20 or so, could be more. Like I absolutely love this movie. It's indefinitely rewatchable for me. My little cousins too. They loved it when they were like pretty young. Like I would always skip some of the parts of it, like any of the like love making or maybe the beach scene. You know, like that's really the only two super rated R moments. I think. I feel like the rest of it's pretty light and fun. But yeah, I could like watch this film over and over. But it's been maybe like at least a year since I've watched it, and my wife was kind of in the other room and then in watching it with me, and she's like, "This movie moves really fast, doesn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's a lot of those '80s films. Sometimes they weren't kind of a modern pace. They maybe took their time, were a little bit slower. But this film really, I feel like it's just scene after scene of
I think
great moments.
One thing that we talk about a lot in movies is like the pacing. Mm-hmm. And for being a movie that's in the 80s, I still think like an audience today could enjoy it because it does move so quick.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest things we have. Like, you know, even movies that we love, we'll go back and watch, and it's like kind of hard to watch them because they're just paced for what was. This one doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, it was before people could look at their cell phones while sitting on the couch watching movies. Or when they primarily watched them in theaters and then maybe rented a VHS player and a tape, you know. Yeah.
One, two, so the movie's only an hour and 37 minutes long, which, like, sometimes we do movies for the podcast, even stuff I relatively like, and you look at the runtime, you're like, oh, man, it's like 2.5 hours. So when I saw, like, when I looked at this, I was like, oh, it's only an hour and a half. Because I had watched this plenty of times. I just hadn't really watched, I had to sit down and watch it in a while. Because it was one of those movies that always came on, like, on AMC or those different, like, cable, like, marathons or something.
Yeah.
And I haven't had cable in a while. So not to be one of the people that brags about that, but because I do have, like, HBO Now and all that stuff. But I just hadn't really watched it in a while. So I watched it because, like, Julie hadn't seen it. So I asked her if she wanted to watch it. And she's like, maybe later. Just because I don't think she's in the mood. I mean, and it's very 80 cheese. And too, there's like some like slightly like homoerotic undertones in it between like David and Michael, and you know some other things that go on.
Speaking of that, I brought up the fan edit. I saw a long time ago, but I showed my wife. You know when Michael sees Star on the beach when the awesome sax performance is going on?
Yeah.
Somebody did an edit where it's like a 3-minute edit where instead of like glancing at her and keeping his eye, he's doing it to the sax man, and they're like doing tight shots on him and stuff, and of course Corey Haim's like pushing his head away. Yeah, that's like probably another one of my favorite scenes in the movie, just because they just let you have fun for a while. You know, they let you like hang out on the beach and be at this party. So it's almost just like a. You know, it's almost just like a little escapism fantasy. Like, okay, I'm going to, you know, you get to be a teenager in the 80s when you watch this film, I think.
Yeah, so it's definitely one of those movies that's very evocative of the time period it was shot during. And then, you know, even though they had to come up with like a fictional town because they're wanting to shoot like in a real, or use the name of a real town, but then once they said that, everybody's like, we don't want to be called the murder capital of the world.
Yeah.
So they just came up with the fictional city name and rolled with that, and nobody cared.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a plus as far as being a film that feels very in and of the time, and even though it's fictional, what place it was shot. Like sometimes films can feel dated, and it can be a detriment in some people's eyes, but this film, I feel like it ages better every year for me.
And the town was Santa Carla, is what they called it. Yeah, and then too, like the big, like I said, it's kind of just fun 80s stuff. Just reminds you of the time period, all that. Like it's a good kind of like time capsule, and all that. The only thing I take issue with is at the end, once you have like the big battle between like David and Michael wins, and once he kills David, not like their idea was if you kill the head vampire, then everybody who hasn't been fully turned will go back to human. And they don't all turn back to human. They find out that it's actually the mom's boyfriend who is the head vampire. Which, I mean, some of the stuff with him, like earlier on, like Max, some of the stuff with his character in the vampires doesn't necessarily track as well. I mean, I guess you could say there's like rebellious teens.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's what they are. I think they're just like...
Yeah,
Because I mean,
so,
he
I
says
guess
like, "I
that-
told you to stay out of here." Like, he's,
Yeah.
but you know, they're basically teenagers. Yeah.
Because basically what he wanted was Michael and Sam's mom Lucy to come and be like the mother to all the Lost Boys, which is kind of like I think
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan
Yeah.
reference. So, but the only thing that doesn't necessarily track is at the very end, like once Max is like about to kill everybody or be in control, then the grandpa drives through the house with the car with like stakes on it and kills them. And he's like, the only thing I couldn't deal with here is the damn vampires.
Which I love that moment though.
Which, like, it's an awesome moment.
Yeah.
But in reality, how could he possibly know where everybody was in the house and what was going on if he wasn't there? I mean, it's a nice way to end it. And maybe you can just see through the window. But
Yeah.
once you had like the cool stuff, like the Frog Brothers who are aware of like vampires, and then they give Sam like the comic book about it and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, they're a great duo, great characters. I love the casting in this film and just the kind of, I don't know, it's just so much fun. Yeah, I love this film.
So did anybody watch any of the direct-to-video sequels they made? So they made two.
I watched the second one, but I didn't watch any more. Just because at the time, they were made quite a while ago at this point.
Yeah.
I think at the time, I basically had to buy them. Like, I don't know if Wad and Willie
like
probably had them.
direct-to-video.
Yeah, Wad and Willie probably had them, but I think I bought the second one, or maybe I just rented it somehow. But it wasn't as easy. Things weren't on. You didn't rent things digitally as often as you do now. So I think I only watched the second one. And Corey Feldman is back in it, and he was the best moments of it, but he very much wasn't like the main character. Did you see any of that?
I saw the first sequel, the direct-to-video one, like 2007 or 8, where
Yeah.
it was. Because I was at some point going to do like a YouTube review where I did a bunch of like direct-to-video sequels to movies, because there was like a bunch of them coming out during that period of time. But then I only ended up watching like that and one other one, and then got tired of the concept and never did it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I liked it okay, but it didn't make me want to go out and see the other one. And was it at the end of the film, or was it a deleted scene where I think Corey Haim shows up to?
I think it's the very end.
Yeah, to kind of fight Corey Feldman, and then the sequel was supposed to be about the Frog Brothers Part 3, right?
Yeah, and then I know Corey Haim passed away before they could do the next one, I believe.
Yeah, and Kiefer Sutherland's son, I think, is in that sequel. But it's just, it's very, as much as this seems like it's definitely of its time and place and made in the 80s and released in the summer, which I saw the release date is July 30th something. So I don't know what the correct release date is. But that film very much feels like it is a direct-to-DVD film from the mid-2000s,
Yes.
and it's not great. But if you're a diehard fan, you've probably already seen it. But if not, and you kind of want to see just a little bit more Frog Brother action, then it's not the worst thing in the world. But I'm sure it's aged poorly as well, that sequel.
That could be a fair assumption.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess we can kind of go around and give our review scores on the movie. So I guess, Derek, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of quiet. It's not because I didn't like the movie. I'm just kind of tired. But, I mean, I really enjoyed it. Like I said, a lot of times when we go back and we watch these movies from the, I even go back into the 60s, because I think we've watched movies from the 60s, right? Yeah, because we did Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
It's just a lot of times there's pacing issues, and it's, and this one, to me, didn't have, other people might disagree, but I didn't find it to have a pacing issue. I felt like it went by pretty quick. It stayed pretty engaging.
Yeah.
Like something similar, like from the 80s, like The Blob, where like The Blob had its moments, like the remake of it, but then it kind of was your stereotypical movie at the time and had a bunch of like just stuff that could have been cut out.
Yeah.
To me, this didn't drag at any point.
There was no filler in this movie at all.
No, and there wasn't, which I think is because, which I think it being only an hour and a half was to its benefit, because a lot of times when you have movies that are like 2 hours long, you get, probably 30 minutes of filler.
Yeah.
But to me, it is funny seeing Kiefer Sutherland in the super 80s version. And like you said, I do think like teenager from the 80s, you know, when you watch it. And there's certain qualities about that. It's like there's movies nowadays that try so hard to be that and they can't.
Yes, yeah.
Why go watch something that tries to be something that can never be when you can have something like this that's a real thing that's way better?
Yes, yeah.
You know, I would have to give it like an 8 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. You know, and it's something that, like, if you were, you know, we always talk about, like, if you had people over, could you show this would be a movie you could actually let people watch?
Yes, yeah.
Background noise, you know. But I really
so I think, Derek, I think I would fall in line pretty close to you. I think it's like 7.5 to 8. Like, fun movie. It's you could, like you said, it's easy to show to people who aren't, you know, especially horror aficionados. It touches on enough of like vampire lore that it's fun for people who are into those types of movies, but it doesn't go so far into them that, you know, it's not like Hammer horror and it's not Twilight. It's like a fun in between place where you don't see that many movies get made like that today, really.
Yeah.
Kind of like fun genre movie. So, you know, I think it falls around like an 8. Like, it's fun to watch. It's very of its time, but it works to its advantage because it makes it like kind of a time capsule of the late 80s, especially like the California coast and stuff like that. So it's a movie I enjoy to watch whenever it comes on, and I don't think it's on any streaming services right now, but hopefully it'll hit some of them soon and be available more widely. But yeah, so I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. Again, I love this film. I kind of picked it because also it's just one of my favorites. I think it's beautifully shot too. As much as people like ape Carpenter style, again, like visually from the 80s and stuff like that, and, you know, the fog and the colors and stuff, like, I think this tops a lot of those. And one has to do with budget. Like, it just feels like it's shot on a really high quality film stock, but also, you know, I just love the look. Some great lens flares and stuff in this, and it looks like it feels like it. You know, it's got very colorful. It just has a lot of style to it as well, and it feels like Joel Schumacher. Like, no scene is less important than any other one in this film. Like, every scene, the way he directs it, whether it's the performances or the camera work, it doesn't seem like he's just trying to go along and just get the shot and move to the next thing. Like, everything has so much visual flair to it, and the editing I think is wonderful too. Like the beach scene, that massacre, I love the way that's edited. The camera zooms, the quick cuts, and they kind of hide some of the violence, which is perfectly fine. You know, this isn't a gore fest. Like, this doesn't need to rely on cheap gore or effects. It's awesome in its own right. And the music, as I mentioned before, I think the music also makes it indefinitely rewatchable. And it's one of those films where, yeah, there may be some films that are quote unquote better movies, and you may appreciate more on certain levels, but you also may not watch those films as much. They may be kind of a harder watch sometimes, you know, on repeat viewings. For me, like, this does what it's trying to do as well as it possibly could. Like, I don't see this film being any better unless it changed dramatically what it was. I mean, I almost feel like a 9.5, like, just because I've watched this film so many times and I get so much enjoyment out of it. And it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. But it comes from the angle of fun, rewatchable horror, something like, you know, Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness. It's more of that angle than something like The Shining, obviously, or Psycho. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this film.
Oops, so I'll wrap up our review and discussion of The Lost Boys. And on the next podcast, we'll be doing Baby Driver, the new movie from Edgar Wright. So we're excited about that as well.
Very excited. Make
sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, subscribe in iTunes, follow on all the social media platforms. You can find all the links at housebyvideostore.com. And links here to all of our work.
Definitely go to if you're watching Twin Peaks, go to our YouTube channel and check our recaps and fan theory video and stuff like that too. Just because if you are only listening to the podcast, you may not be aware of some other content we have going up on YouTube and the site.
All right, on social media, you can find me on everything at MetaWorldDerek.
And I believe William is Will_Droid. He just dropped out for technical errors. I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter. And thanks for listening. Look out for next week when we cover Baby Driver.